Training the dogs is one thing, but training the people, that's really where it is, because now they can be better to their dogs. Their dogs can trust them more, and they're going to be more successful. And I've done a lot of coaching of people at nationals, and it's really what turns me on is putting together the dog handler combination and helping them understand each other. And well, success is bound to happen when you can do that.
Well, hello there, and welcome to our third Purina Masterclass in the 2024 series. Well, I certainly have to thank everybody at Nestle Purina for sponsoring these masterclass, and everybody just from all over the country, they just tell me how much they enjoy these. And tonight, you're really going to get a dandy here. I'm going to tell you about our guest here in just a second. Just, I guess, with that being said, once again, I want to thank you for being here. Thank Carl Gunzer, Ray Vogt, and everybody at Purina for everything they do for our sporting dogs. And, well, I'm excited and proud to be part of that team. So I guess with that being said, Robin, is there anything else I need to bring up?
What?
Anything else I need to say before we get rolling?
It's live.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, I'll tell you, we're live. We're in a rural area in New York. We're on a satellite location. We've got our Starlink set up outside. And, well, and I guess my hair, I'm getting up from the makeup crew telling me I'm not quite ready. But if we have any problems, which it's possible, we've got reasonable internet, but it is possible. It is going to be taped. It's going to be on our website. It's available forever. And so if for some reason you lose connection or if something goes south, where you're going to be able to have access to it. But we've done a number of tests. I think we're good to go. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce here in just a second our this evening's guest. Dr. RuthAnn Lobos from Boulder, Colorado. Dr. Lobos is a senior veterinarian at Nestle Purina in the pet care division and a graduate of Louisiana State University. And well, and I think you're going to find her very engaging. So I got to meet Dr. Lobos here just a little bit over a year ago. And well, you're in for a real treat. So with that being said, let's get her on here. Hello.
Hey there, Pat. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the Purina series tonight. I know we talked this spring about doing this, and I'm really excited, and I'm glad we're able to make it work.
Yeah, me too. Anytime I get to talk about bird dogs, it's always worth my time. It has become a huge passion of mine, and love to just be able to share knowledge to other bird dog and sporting dog enthusiasts. So I'm so happy to be here tonight.
So you have a yellow Labrador and a German Wirehair.
So yep, a yellow lab. I've had labs pretty much throughout my life, and this is our first little dipping of our toe into the pointing dog world with a wire-haired pointing Griffon puppy named Journey. So she just turned 5 months old, and I am living and breathing all of the crazy things that puppy parenting it allows us to experience.
And you're an avid hunter, an outdoorsman. You and your husband both.
Yep. So I like to say I'm an adult onset hunter. I started hunting about 4 years ago, thanks to my hard charging Labrador Finn at home, and he was always my running buddy and beside me for training for multiple marathons. And we got him when he was about 2.5, and he was never formally hunt trained. It just had a lot of natural drive, and I saw him out there in the pheasant field and flushing those birds, and I was like, I have to be part of this. So went through hunter safety, like a lot of folks did during COVID, and just fell passionately in love with watching him work, just being in the outdoors in a different space that hunting allows us to do.
How cool is that? Well, I mean, if you have any athletes, canine athletes are no exception. You're going to get bumps and bruises. These dogs are charging through the woods. They're charging at these trials, and it's inevitable that you're going to have some injuries. And so tonight, well, you're going to give us the uh, first aid 101, and we went through it. There's a lot of material here, so uh, I'm not going to take any more time. I'm going to let you get rolling, and we're going to jump into this, and let's make it happen.
Let's do it. All right. So yeah, as Pat, I moved the wrong way. There we go. As you said, with this sporting dog first aid, right? Whether you're doing
Actually, Ruth, and you need to move the other way a little bit.
Let's see.
There, you're dead center, right there. We got a little narrow window there.
But yeah, so whether you're doing hunt tests or field trials or you're out there, flushing birds in the outdoors, these athletes are going to wind up, facing some sort of probably bumps, bruises, and hopefully after tonight, you'll have a little bit better idea just kind of how to manage those and what to have in your first aid kit, whether that's in the truck or if you're out there, in the field, what you should have in your vest. But on the next slide, as we'll see, one might question why I have a slide of Benjamin Franklin if we are talking sporting dog first aid. But for those of you who don't know, he is the one who gave us the amazing quote that I use so often, whether I am, because while I am a full-time veterinarian for Purina, I still practice. So I'm in a clinic a couple of days a month. And when I'm talking to clients in the exam room or friends who have dogs of all shapes and sizes, we talk a lot about how an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And our friend Benjamin Franklin here is the one who first bestowed those very wise words on us. So we're going to talk a lot about what we need to have to hopefully prevent, but always good to have the right things in our vest and in our kits in case disaster does strike. So on the next slide here, these are the top 3 things. If you remember nothing else from tonight's masterclass, please keep in mind before you go out, whether that is, going to your first field trial or hunt test, or maybe you're going out for training and you're starting in the off season, but making sure that you have the microchip and information and an ID tag that are up to date. So for example, Journey here, my puppy, we just got her microchipped and it immediately is registered to the clinic where we gave her microchip. So you do have to go in and change that information so that it has your exact information that's there. And if you've moved or things like that, to make sure that's up to date, because heaven forbid they, take off and get separated. Those 2 pieces of information we know are going to help in the highest likelihood to have a reunion happen. The second thing is, Pat, you were talking about you're in upstate New York, a little bit off the grid, maybe. So before you do all of that, really downloading the information for the nearest emergency vet clinic and having that stored on your phone so that you're not out there in the middle of the field, with your cell phone up in the air, trying to get that one little bar to download Google on where you need to take your dog, because we know that oftentimes in cases of disaster, those minutes can really be life-saving. So if you've already got that on your phone, where the nearest emergency vet clinic is, that oftentimes can be the difference in a catastrophic injury versus a minor one. And then lastly, to just, every year, put a new copy of your dog's vet clinic, or veterinary records in your glove box. So you have that, or in your first aid kit, but have, again, that printed copy, because that's going to be something that is so very important to know, what vaccines they've had. Maybe they've had, an ongoing chronic medical condition that they are on medications for. The more that that veterinarian that is seeing your dog on emergency knows about your dog and their history, the better treatment that they can give your dog. So having those updated records, again, is going to put you in a really, really good spot. So I like to call this the disaster saver, and a lot of people oftentimes key in to the gunner kennel that's in there, in the bed of the truck. And while yes, that is super important, what I really am talking about is doing a tailgate check. So after that day of doing field trials or the hunt tests, or out there, whether that is working in the off season and working on retrieves and water work and things like that, or it is out there in the field and you've come back from a day of hunting, doing that tailgate check on your dog, checking them from nose to tail, can oftentimes help you get ahead of something that is small, that if you pop them in that crate, you drive 3 or 4 hours back to your motel or to your your cabin or wherever it is that you're staying, that dirt, that bacteria, maybe that cut just starts to get bigger and could potentially be more complicated to take care of, when if you had noticed that it was there at that. Oh goodness, that's Finn chiming in. He definitely agrees with the tailgate check. But that oftentimes will, again, seeing that ahead of time and being able to maybe take that grass on out from in between the pads of their paws and things like that, can oftentimes save you from a lot of angst and save your dog from a medical condition that might need more intense veterinary care. Doesn't take long. The other thing, I'll do my plug here, for all of the rehab and sports medicine folks out there. I'm certified in canine rehab as well, but the tailgate check also allows your dog an opportunity to cool down before you are putting them into the kennel. I keep shifting the wrong way. Before you're going to put them into the kennel and potentially have that long car ride back to wherever you're going, giving them an opportunity to cool down and let their muscles and their blood flow just kind of get back to a normal pace and a normal rhythm, again, will help them the following day to just be that much fresher and allow you to have more opportunities out there doing the things that we love to do with our dogs.
So, Dr. RuthAnn, you have a yellow Labrador.
Yes.
You'll see a speck of blood on a yellow Labrador pretty easily, but a black dog, different story. I've had, these dogs aren't going to show the pain. They're not going to show. They can jam a stick in their chest, puncture their foot. I found if you just take your hand and just go up and down each limb and look at your hand, I've discovered a lot of puncture wounds now. So I'm sure that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. 1 second, I'm going to shut my office door because they are. There's some excitement. I'm not sure that's going to help any, but
It's muffled a little bit.
Helps with my my authenticity and credibility when my sporting dogs are barking in the background, right? But yeah, absolutely, Pat. So really getting in there, like looking in between the pads of each of their paws, looking underneath their bellies, as you said, rubbing your hands, up underneath in their groin and their armpits. Also, I highly recommend, flipping their ears over and looking in there. That is a prime spot for not only, especially this time of year, with ticks growing and burrowing in that space, which again can open them up depending on where you are in the world, to Lyme disease and other sorts of tick-borne diseases, or lichia and things like that. And if we can find those ticks right away and pop them off, again, helps them to be able to stay out in the field with us that much longer. So on the next slide. So, okay, so moving in a little bit more to the nitty gritty of the first aid kit. I hear this time and time again when I am talking to friends who are sporting dog enthusiasts, and some of them have been hunters for years. But knowing, so in your first aid kit, what is in there? So doing an audit at the beginning of every season, I think is super, super important. So if you want to build this slide for me, Pat. So knowing, what's inside, audit that regularly. Certainly, if you go in and you use it, you want to always replace that. But a lot of times we have the fortunate opportunity of not actually opening our first aid kit. I'm going to knock on wood that last year I didn't have to do that. And then secondly, not only what's inside, but why you have those contents in there. And then lastly, making sure that you know how to use them. So I have a very dear friend of mine who talks about, she's like, I have a couple of staplers in there and some other things that I don't even know. One of my friends is a vet and gave it to me and said I should have it in there. I don't even know what it is, and I certainly don't feel comfortable using it. So if you don't put it in there, because again, just because it works for some people doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. And if you don't have a good comfort level with it, certainly using it in an emergency situation is not going to set anybody up for success. All right, so we're going to dig in a little bit to some tools here. The first one that is my absolute favorite, it seems very just commonplace, if you will, but this is a slip lead. You can get it from your veterinarian. Oftentimes we have them in the clinic that are branded because we love for you to be able to advertise for us. But the amazing thing about this tool is, one, it weighs maybe less than an ounce. Two, it can be used as it's designed as a leash, right? So if you're out there, you have to cross a stream, maybe your dog gets hurt and you need them to stay by your side to be able to get back to your truck or wherever it is to be able to get help. So you actually need to use that as the leash. It also can be used as a muzzle. So we're going to talk a little bit about things that affect the mouth, and certainly with our dogs, they don't mean to, but if something happens where they are in excruciating pain and you are trying to stabilize them out there, they may try to bite you. It's their natural instinct. And so being able to use that slip lead as a muzzle can also save you from a trip to the emergency room from on the human side of things. I'll spare you the story of when my mom took me to the veterinarian when I got bit by a dog when I was about 11 years old. It was mortifying from my side of things. But anyway, the other thing that this slip lead can be used for is it can also be used as a tourniquet. So, if again, there's some sort of catastrophic cut that happens to one of their limbs, using this to be able to tie off that bleeding vessel is again going to be just another really great use for the slip lead. My second favorite, this again seems very pedestrian, nail clippers and some quick stop, but alas, it is some of the almost like day saving tools that you can have. Our dogs, if they tear a toenail, Pat, as you mentioned, a lot of times they don't show pain, and they may not, right, when they get their nail ripped off or partially ripped off, but eventually that could, cause some limping for them. And or other dogs who have less of a pain tolerance, they might be a little bit more sensitive. A little torn nail might have them three-legged lame, and then you can't continue, out there of your outdoor adventure day because they have a small tear in their toenail. So having a pair of nail clippers, being able to trim that back, if it is far enough back that you do, get having that quick stop on there can oftentimes allow you to continue to hunt or maybe have the rest of your field trial day that's happening. And then you can worry about it in the evening and flush it out really well and things like that. But at least it doesn't stop your day right then and there. Then our next is the thermometer. So I usually kind of poll the audience, but Pat, since you're going to be my little guinea pig here tonight, do you know what normal body temperature for a dog is?
It's like 101 typically. Am I right there?
Yep. So anywhere between about 99.5 and 102, 102.5 is considered, our normal range for dogs at rest. When they're out there working in the field, it can go up, it can get up to 103 if it's, some of these warm days that we're starting to get now in the summertime. And then certainly later on, towards preseason hunting and things like that, even in the early season of September, as those temperatures start to climb, sometimes their body temperatures can get up to, 103, 104. And as long as we can get them cooled back down, that is not necessarily the emergency. But if we see that we're trying to cool them down and it is not working, and that temperature is continuing to either go up or it's staying up there at that 104, that 105, that is super concerning. And we'll talk about kind of the signs to look for in heat stroke and heat exhaustion a little bit later. But again, having this, having that thermometer as part of your first aid kit can give you good indications on where they're trending if you're suspecting something like heat stroke or heat exhaustion. Next one is a pair of clippers. I also like to say, or wire cutters, any sort of multi-tool that you can have. This is great for if you're out in areas with barbed wire to help with, releasing that. Also, when we encounter our good friend, the porcupine, great to be able to pull those quills out and have a good grip on there so that you can get those out before they start to become too big of a problem.
Can I inject something here?
Yeah, for sure.
What I started carrying is a pair of pliers called the Manly Super Pliers, and what they are used. They're a fishing plier, and they use them typically the saltwater version because they will cut a hook, a really heavy gauge hook, very easily. And
Okay.
they're a little more expensive, but they've got little side cutters. And I've had dogs, come back with a fishing lure in their leg, or and
Yeah.
trying to cut a barb off a fishing lure with standard pliers is a real challenge. So look up Manly Super Pliers, Manley. There's a few versions, and
Okay.
they're typically in a fishing deal. And you'll see you'll never have another pair of pliers other than that in your kit because you can cut barbed wire or a heavy gauge treble hook to be able to get out of a dog's leg much easier. And that's a good time to get bit trying to pull a hook out of a dog's leg.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right.
Manly Super Pliers. Look them up. Nope.
Manly Super Pliers. I like it. All right. So next up, and again, these are just some forceps that can be used. They're great again as a kind of a complement to those wire cutters or those those needle nose pliers that are there. Good for pulling out if you've got certainly the porcupine quills, but also sometimes those grass-ons can burr in there pretty good, and just being able to to have those to pull that out can be beneficial. They also don't weigh much, so throwing a pair of those in there for you can oftentimes do you a lot of good without adding too much weight.
I have one quick question popped up here that maybe this is a good time. On your tailgate check, and you're talking about the forceps there. The question came in: do you recommend a check under the third eyelid for grass seeds or other debris?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great call out. We actually did a series with Pheasants Forever called Ask a Vet, and that was one of the topics that we talked about is really doing that thorough eye check. And I'll talk about that coming up here in a few slides. But certainly,
Great.
I mean that is huge, a huge place where all those little seeds like to hang out, and then again can burrow in there and stick to the cornea of their eye and cause a lot more problems. Where if we can get that flushed out right there at the tailgate, going to save us and our pocketbook and our dog a lot of angst. So these are a pair of clippers. I don't, for full transparency, I do not carry clippers in my vest if I'm out, hunting for pheasants and things like that. But certainly do have them back in the truck in our bigger first aid kit, and namely because a lot of times, as we were talking about, with yellow lab versus black lab. a lot of times we can see things better on the lighter coated dogs than you can on a darker coated. But even, when we start to think about, the setters and the golden retrievers and things like that that have the longer coat, if you see a little bit of blood there, clipping the hair around there not only gives you better visibility to see, how big is this wound, but also again removes the hair from that place so it's not sticking in the wound and then being, an area that can just keep causing more and more debris and bacteria and things to get into a wound. So being able to just kind of clip the hair right around there can save you again a lot of time out of the field when we want to be out there in the outdoors with our pups. And then this goes back to the question about the third eyelid. So, and the seeds that are in there, these, while they are very long, cotton tipped applicators, Q-tips, not for necessarily cleaning their ears, but this is a really nice soft way by using that cotton tip to be able to just kind of brush that debris if it is stuck on their eyes. One of the other things that I do love about doing a tailgate check is typically these guys are tired at the end of the day. So you are able to do things that maybe normally on any given Saturday, you wouldn't have as good or as large of patience with your dog. When they're tired, you oftentimes can get away with things a little bit better. So this, having that cotton tipped applicator to be able to swab some of that stuff out of there gently without the risk of, scratching their eye, that's where these really come into play for us. Yep. So then we've got our stapler and our tongue depressor. I do not recommend using the tongue depressor to actually depress their tongues, unless, again, you have a good knowledge sense of your dog. If, with Finn, he gets poked and prodded and, all the time with me here. So I feel like I have a pretty good runway with him. But some dogs, especially if they are panicked or hurting, if you actually try to use that tongue depressor to depress their tongue, they might wind up biting it down. What I like to actually use the tongue depressors more for is if you need to stabilize something. So if there is a limb that's been broken, and you can use those tongue depressors as little splints on either side to bandage them to just get you to safety, get you to care, and things like that. The stapler is one people love to have the stapler in their first aid kit. What I would recommend doing is actually practicing. You can either, some veterinarians where I do relief work, we see a lot of sporting dogs. So we will do for our owners from time to time these little clinics on how to use a stapler properly. And it's not hard, but it can be intimidating. And especially if your dog is hurting and then you're nervous and all of those things can just combine for not a great scenario. But if you, work with your veterinarian, I've not tried this myself, but I have had colleagues tell me that actually practicing on a banana is a really good way to get familiar with the feel and how to line up that stapler over that cut that you're trying to close up. But so, if you've got some bananas at home, putting a little slice in the peel and then using the stapler to practice might be something that you do for fun this weekend. But I do recommend, if you're going to use it, to make sure that you are comfortable using it before just carrying it around in your pack. And then lastly, a good pair of bandage scissors. I see this all too often when folks will just have, they'll just throw some regular shears or, they've just got toss a pair of scissors in there, making sure that they have that blunt tip on the end so that if you are either trying to cut some bandage material that you are using to stabilize or cover a wound on your own dog or get a bandage off. I see all too often that sometimes if they're using regular scissors that they wind up cutting their dog when trying to actually get a bandage off and then creating another wound in itself. So making sure you have bandage appropriate bandage scissors in your pack is going to be critical. All right, so moving on from tools, now we're talking a little bit more about medications and supplies. This first one is your chlorhexidine solution. So this is an antiseptic solution. You can get wound flushed from probably from Amazon, from Walgreens, from wherever. But this is also my plug because I should take a step back, way back, and talk about when you're getting your vet records, and you're carrying a copy of those, making sure you have a good relationship with your veterinarian, and making sure that they understand what you and your dog do together. Because when I have a client who tells me, oh, they're out there, they run field trials, or they're out there, doing hunt tests, and, in the fall, we're flushing pheasants and things like that, my level of differentials or possible diagnoses when they come in with different conditions is going to be different from the next client who comes in whose dog lives in suburbia USA and sometimes goes to the dog park, and other than that just kind of hangs out at the house and goes for walks with them. It's going to change my mindset, and it's going to help me get to a better, faster diagnosis if I know what you are doing with your dog. The other thing that some veterinarians will do is, if they have that good relationship and they understand what your dog goes through with you, they may give you, a few more supplies to keep in your med kit and your first aid kit than they would for, again, Joe Schmo down the street whose dog lives in suburbia USA and just goes on dog walks. So things like this, like the chlorhexidine solution. This is in concentrate that we have at the clinic. We use it for surgery scrubs and wound rinses and things like that. Oftentimes, we will either give or sell this wound flush, to clients who come in, and we dilute it out for them so they've got the right concentration. And this is great for flushing any kind of wound that you see, whether or not it needs stitches, whether or not it needs a bandage over it, and that sort of thing. I have the phrase that dilution is the solution to pollution. So if there is a cut, if we can flush that out, again, get that bacteria, get as much debris, get the hair out of there, that is going to set that wound up for success, for healing and success, much more quickly than if that's allowed to stay in there. So I keep a small little bottle of this in my vest, as well as then a bigger bottle back at the truck, so that we can always make sure we've got enough wound flush if we need it. The next one is some sort of triple antibiotic solution, or not solution, triple antibiotic ointment there. So again, after you flush that wound, putting some sort of covering over it, so that it can be protected, and off, this is Neosporin that's here, but any of the other antiseptic ointments, again, is going to just provide that bit of barrier. Either if you are going to bandage it, then it's there, but if it's a wound that maybe just needs a little bit of protection from getting more debris in there, you have that you can just squirt on top of it and give it that barrier till you can get back to the truck and take care of it more if you need it. This is great. A quick stop, bleeding stop. I think, they have a variety of brands that are out there, but this is a good, if there is something that is bleeding excessively, putting the EMT gel in there, to help to just kind of slow that bleeding or stop it till you can get back to the truck and get some better care for that wound, will just buy you a little bit more time. Next up, oh gosh, that one is so small and I don't remember what is up there. That that is terrible to say. Looks like iLube, I think, is what's in there. Let's build the next one and see if that helps me to remember. um, so that's our bandage supplies. And again, this is talking with your veterinarian. You can get all of these supplies, off of Amazon, or, at your local drugstore. But if working with your veterinarian to get things like, starting on the left there, that's some cast padding. So that's a little bit squishier. We'll help you to provide some bulk and support to the bandage if you do need to like stabilize a limb, or just add a little bit of padding there so you don't wrap the bandage too tight over a wound and then restricts that blood flow to the rest of the limb where that wound is. But that, and then you've got white tape there. You've also got elasticon and vet wrap, and all of those can have varying uses of in the bandage. And so really having that conversation, a lot of times too, we'll do with clients, we'll do a little like a bandage 101 course so that they feel comfortable putting a non-stick pad on that wound and then putting that cast padding, that squishier bandage on top. And then you do one more layer of some stretch gauze and then some vet wrap, and you've got yourself a nice bandage that, again, if it's a wound that either needs stitches or needs veterinary inspection, now you've got it covered and stable, and also, away from your dog being able to lick it, in a pretty quick fashion. So again, having that conversation with your veterinarian, either in the off season, now is a great time to really, kind of just have that maybe that little tutorial with them on how to put a bandage on just in case when you're out there in the field. This is sterile saline eye wash. So going back to that question about the tailgate check, I keep this, a small bottle in my vest, and then we have probably 2 or 3 that are actually in our truck in the bigger kit. And what this allows, one, certainly for eye flushing, fantastic. Noting here, though, not contact solution. So contact cleaning solution is very different. It contains boric acid and a number of other really astringent agents that are in there that aren't necessarily with one flush going to do severe damage to your dog's eye, but it is not going to feel good to them, and then may not set you up for success on future eye flushes. So we really want to make sure that we're using that sterile saline eye wash, not contact solution. But again, getting those eyes flushed out, getting those little seeds out of there from that third eyelid is going to be super critical to help prevent some further irritation on their cornea and things like that. The sterile saline can also be used as a wound flush, but wound flush cannot be used as eye flush. So that's, again, an important thing to note, that if you are using chlorhexidine to flush those wounds, do not use that on the eye, but you can use that sterile saline to flush both the eye and a wound that's there. So we've got some eye lube. This is, again, a great place to talk to your veterinarian about. The tricky thing with eyes is if there is a scratch on the cornea, so that clear part of their eyeball, it does not have a blood supply. So if there is a deep ulcer or an abrasion or, a real cut that's there, the blood vessels have to come from the whites of their eyes to actually come in and heal that. So if you have some eye ointment in your kit, and if you notice there's a scratch there, getting that lube in there and that antibiotic ointment in there as quick as possible before you can get to the veterinarian is just going to give you that jump start on helping that eye to heal. Next up, we've got peroxide up here. So this one, again, has a number of uses. You can certainly use it when there is that initial wound that happens. Right away, that hydrogen peroxide can help to kind of bubble that bacteria up to the surface, especially if it's a little bit of a deeper wound that's there. But after that first, onset of that wound, we don't want to keep using hydrogen peroxide. It actually delays healing if we keep pouring hydrogen peroxide into that wound. So that initial first cleaning, sure, okay to use it. But again, that's the one and only time. Then the other use that peroxide can have, again, if you're comfortable doing this with your dog, is if they eat something that they shouldn't. Like perhaps, maybe hypothetically speaking, you're hunting during the fall, during October season, when there's also Halloween and chocolates in your truck, and perhaps you leave your Labrador in your car and then come back to find that the 2 bags of mini Nestle Crunches are now devoured. Hypothetically speaking, we're not incriminating the yellow Labrador who is pictured here looking quite intense. Um, but this would be a good place if you had hydrogen peroxide in your truck to actually go ahead and administer some. Usually we say about a tablespoon or so at a time. Most veterinarians will recommend not more than 3 doses of hydrogen peroxide. If they don't vomit after that, then it is important to get to an emergency veterinarian, and we have other tools in our toolbox that we can use to make them vomit. If you are unsure about whether or not what they ate is going to be good to have them vomit back up, do not make them do it. So I'll give you an example. My sister sent me a text the other day that their 2-year-old Portuguese water dog jumped up on the counter and ate 4 whole chicken thighs with the bone included, and wanted to know if they should make the dog vomit. And I said, no, absolutely not, because those chicken bones coming back up could scrape up the esophagus and cause more damage than if they actually go through and maybe get stuck somewhere, and yes, would need exploratory surgery, but that is going to be easier to heal from than a, heaven forbid, like a perforated esophagus. So they get a hole in their esophagus from the chicken bone. That is a much, much more difficult wound to heal from than a blockage in their intestines. So if they do things like I've gotten text about the dog ate an aluminum can, those sorts of things. If in doubt, do not induce vomiting and just get to the nearest veterinary emergency clinic that you already have their information downloaded on their phone because you remember it from earlier in the presentation. All right, so on the next slide, Benadryl. So I know this one we talk a lot about with snake bites. So I get questions a lot about what to do, whether or not to use Benadryl, also the rattlesnake vaccine in itself. And that could probably be a whole nother masterclass. But I will say, you could talk to different veterinarians and you're going to get differing opinions about Benadryl. I am a fan of using it when they get a snake bite or when they are having any sort of potential allergic reaction. More so in the snake bite situation, because most of the time it helps them to just calm down. And that state of calm, again, will slow their heart rate, may slow the potential venom from continuing to circulate faster and just potentially cause more potential damage. So if it helps them to stay calm, that is going to be a win in itself for getting them to the emergency clinic and getting them the treatment that they need. The dosage is 1 milligram per pound. So a lot of people oftentimes are kind of perplexed by that. But so Finn, my lab here, he weighs 75 pounds. That means he gets 75 milligrams as 1 dose, and they can have that up to 3 times a day. So again, I think, again, it's a good thing that we have in our vest. I also keep extras back in the truck just in case. And then lastly, I don't carry this in my vest, but we use this all the time during hunting season and certainly pre-training, Fortiflora, because while it might not necessarily be a life-threatening emergency, if they're having blowout diarrhea, this is going to limit their ability to stay hydrated. If you're going on multi-day hunts or multi-day trials, they're not getting the nutrition that they need, and they're going to start to lose condition and lose performance with that. So having, the Fortiflora, that probiotic, help to stabilize their gut, keep their immune system up to par, will, again, oftentimes help you stay out there more in the field with them and vice versa. All right, so when an emergency does happen, we have to stop what is causing immediate harm, and we have to assess what is the biggest threat to their stability, because sometimes there are multiple things that are going on at the same time, and we have to kind of do like they do in the ER and triage what is affecting our dog the most. So if you want to build this slide for me, Certainly staying calm. Our dogs read our body behavior and our body language and feed off of that more than we, I think, even give them credit for. So staying calm is, in our brains and our actions is going to help them to stay calm. Secondly, you have to breathe. I do this all the time when I get super, intense about things. I forget to actually take a breath. Again, they're mirroring our behavior. So if we are staying calm and taking good slow breaths, that will help them to stay calm and relaxed as well. Third, identify that main threat to health. If they've got a big cut, like this dog here, big cut over his eye, he also may be, have a body temperature of 105. I've got to get his body temperature down, and then I'm going to assess that cut on his face, because if his temperature is high and continuing to climb, that's going to have a greater effect on his long-term stability than this cut here that's by his eyeball. And then develop a plan and get to work. So hopefully you already know what's in your kit, why it's there, so you can look at your tools and get going. And then lastly, you want to take another breath, which is sometimes, again, the hardest part of all of this. All right, so on the next slide, now we're going to go through some of the common injuries that we see, starting with those paws and pads. So we see this guy, right? He has been out running on some really unfriendly terrain. Oftentimes this happens early in the season when the dogs, their pads and their skin and their coat just aren't necessarily as conditioned to the elements as we would like. So I'd poll the audience here, but if you want to build this slide for me, Pat, it will be, what tools are we going to use in this situation? How would we manage this? And then potentially how could we, help to prevent this? So some of the tools we would use, certainly, flushing those wounds, right? We got dilution is the solution to pollution. Those aren't necessarily wounds that can be closed, but if we give them, we flush that debris out, we flush that bacteria out, and then we cover them. Now, Jones here, I loved the ingenuity that happened with these folks. They were out, they were hunting in the backcountry, didn't have a whole lot of supplies, knew this was they were getting back to their truck that morning. So they used what they had. They took some of their, knee-high socks, put them on there, put some vet wrap around, so that way Jones isn't going to sit there and lick at his wounds and make them much worse, right? Because oftentimes it's not that primary wound, it's sometimes the dog then making more wounds for themselves. So by covering that, he has that barrier and isn't going to be able to get to that brush burn as easily, and will give that skin a chance to heal. And then, how could we have prevented this potentially? So knowing the terrain that you're going in, knowing how well your dog's pads and or paws are conditioned to that environment, potentially some boots could work. These are the Lewis boots. I don't have much luck with them. There are other folks who do. And there's a whole host of kinds of boots that are out there. I do recommend not trying them on day one. So, or when you need them, I do recommend practicing with them, getting your dog in different situations just to feel comfortable having boots on their paws. I tried these on Finn, and he was like a Tennessee walking horse with them. He was high stepping, and we wound up losing them on the first trial run that we had, and things like that. So, but again, there are lots of folks who use these and swear by them, especially hunting in places like Arizona, where a lot of times, that terrain is just brutal on their paws and their pads. So this is, the next one. This one certainly is a common one we see and opens up a discussion that I won't get into today about whether or not to remove that dew claw. But because that's a big debate out there, to leave it or to take it. But again, in this scenario, right, having those little nail clippers, trimming off that torn toenail, flushing it out, and then potentially continuing on your day, allowing for more hunt tests to happen, maybe that field trial run to go again, things like that. If you're out there in the field, trimming that off, flushing it, letting it go, find pheasants. And then when you get back, start to better assess, okay, how bad of a tear is it? Is it something that really I do need to see the veterinarian about? Those sorts of things. But again, that quick trim of the nail can get you back out there doing what you need to do for the rest of the day. All right. So this one is a real life experience, and Finn will be debuting here momentarily. But this is one of those. I tried not to say "I told you so" to my husband. If we go back to the slide, one of the slides at the beginning, talking about that tailgate check, right? So this was Thanksgiving week a few years ago, and my husband had taken Finn out to go duck hunting. Did not do said tailgate check. Comes home. They go to bed that night. Next morning, we wake up and Finn is like three-legged lame. This is not his paw, but his paw looked very much like this. And come to find out that he had some sort of little reed that had poked up into his paw and caused a nice abscess. So had we noticed that the night before, certainly, or when they got back to the truck after duck hunting, flushed that wound out really well, could have potentially prevented a lot of things that then occurred, right? So if we build this slide for me, Pat, with this, the tailgate check is going to be key. Once it gets to a state like this, you're really going to need to see the veterinarian. Again, making sure to try to find out if anything that is in there causing that swelling and that abscess is still in there, and if there is, a broken bone, one of their little toe bones, if that's broken, certainly would need to be assessed in a different way than if it is just a simple abscess or foreign body that has poked into that. So for Finn here, if you want to click to the next one, we did wind up having to take him to the vet for x-rays that next day. If you want to click, it'll circle it there. It's a little hard to tell, but there is this little gas pocket that red circle is around. So fortunately for us, the foreign body was no longer in there, but he did have a really good abscess. And then on the next slide, you can see how very sad he looks. What's not pictured there is how sad I was because of this wound, we then could not go pheasant hunting the day after Thanksgiving like we had planned because he still had this open wound on his paw and was healing from that abscess. So there still might be a bit of angst about this between me and my husband because, again, he had done that tailgate check and we'd seen that wound a little bit earlier, potentially could have rustled up some pheasants that day after Thanksgiving. But it allows me to help to impart some wisdom on y'all so that you can hopefully have all the hunts that you would like coming up this fall. So on the next one, yeah, we see here, this is a picture of one of my friends, Dr. Seth Bynum, his German Shorthair Pointer, who decided to make friends with a porcupine that day. And so this is, again, what tools would you use, right? Building this slide. I would want to certainly use that slip lead, right? Those porcupine quills are right up in and around his mouth. Also want to check and make sure there's not any in the roof of the mouth. That's another place that those little quills love to hide, and they're designed such that they can burrow in there and cause more damage if we can't get them out right away. So using that slip lead as a muzzle, and then either using your manly tools there, Pat, or some of those forceps and being able to pull out those quills. Again, then we can hopefully get right back out there doing the things we love to do. On the next slide here, so we've got this wound, right? So the backstory to this is this was one of my friend's dogs. They were actually doing some backcountry hunting. They had an axe and were chopping wood and did a backswing, and the dog was right behind them. And that is a wound from the axe that hit there by the eyeball. Had it been over just a little bit, it would have certainly been a much more catastrophic injury. So they got super lucky in this scenario. But what we would want to do, right? Dilution is the solution to pollution. Because it is so close to the eye, I would certainly recommend using that sterile saline flush in this scenario, and getting that wound flushed out as good as you can. It's not as well pictured here, but it was bleeding fairly fairly profusely. So having some of that quick clot to be able to put on there till you can get back to the truck and get back to safety is going to be good. If you don't have that, certainly putting in some of that uh, ophthalmic antibiotic ointment in there to start to get some good healing going and just provide that layer of protection is going to set that wound up for healing a little bit more quickly. So if you build the next slide, you'll see they didn't really have a great first aid kit, so they had to use whatever they had with them. So they took this bandana to try to kind of apply some pressure, keep that wound clear. As one can imagine, it lasted all of about 0.001 miles before the dog pulled that bandana off of his face and wanted just to go and get back to the truck. So trying to again use what you've got on hand, but if you've got a good first aid kit with the tools in it that you need, again that will set everybody up for success. This one I think is pretty straightforward on what tools, if you want to click and it'll build, but what tools you use and how would you manage it? That's again certainly where those manly wire cutters are gonna come in great to be able to snip off that barbed wire. And then with a wound like that, certainly flushing. If you can get back to the truck again and maybe clip it up and you can better assess how deep is that, did the barbed wire go, will just help to give you, just a little bit more visibility when then getting to the veterinarian. If you clip it and you see that it's super deep, I would say don't waste time on, shaving that hair that's around there. Just get to that emergency vet as quickly as you can. So this is the last, and this slide has a little bit of a story to it, right? So you're like, what does a herd of cattle have to do with anything with sporting dogs? Well, it's a little bit of a sidebar, but it's also not out of the realm of things that you may come across in your sporting dog adventures. So this was actually a story where my husband and I were going backcountry camping. At the time we had three dogs. Two who have now subsequently passed, but we still have Finn. And we had a little French bulldog as well as, at the time, a 16-year-old German Shorthair Pointer who was mostly deaf and mostly blind. And we decided we were going to go hike like 4.5 miles into the backcountry and set up camp by this little creek and have a nice weekend away. We also, at the time, had we still have him, but at the time he was 6, a 6-year-old human along for the ride as well. And we were coming across this creek, and we had the dogs. We had put them on a leash to cross the creek, and then I took the dogs off the leash because we were going to continue up the trail and trying to corral all three of these dogs on a trail, and all of the 40-pound pack that I had on my back and all of that was just going to be too much of a challenge. So we took them off the leash, and just as we did that, a herd of cattle came down the mountainside, and my French bulldog decided that he was going to pull a scene out of When Harry Met Sally and started chasing this herd of cattle. And he started a stampede. They quickly ran up the mountainside, and you could see, and every so often I just caught sight of this little French bulldog jumping, and the cattle still running off. And then we lost him. And we wound up, it was probably about the longest hour of my life, but we lost him in the woods. And I could see that the cattle were no longer running for their lives from this French bulldog who was chasing them. And, but I couldn't find him. I couldn't find Riggs. And my husband and I split up. We were going back and forth trying to find him. And eventually my husband did find him. So if you want to click to the next slide. And he had He was three-legged lame, and his front left leg there was bending in a position that it should not have been bending. And so I used, this was one of those times where I did not have my first aid kit stocked properly. So we wound up using two little sticks and some vet wrap there to stabilize his leg. And we had to hike the 3/4 of a mile back out to the truck. And then we wound up, if you build to the next slide, we wound up at the emergency clinic here in Boulder. And if you click to the next slide, you can see he did a number on his radius and his ulna there where he fractured that. And on the next slide, you'll see he has a lovely, oh, it didn't build, but he had a lovely plate with about 8 screws in his arm. And there he is looking quite adorable with his bandage on his leg. But all of that to say, like, had I had the wherewithal to quick leash him up, that whole expedition that we had could have been prevented, and we would have continued on our merry way into the wilderness and been able to have the outdoor adventure that we had started off to have, instead of winding up about $8,000 later at the emergency clinic, having a plate put on his leg. So this is also my plug to you, knowing now, while Riggs here was not a sporting dog for us, knowing the conditions that they face and the challenges that we put them through and all of that, to go and investigate some pet insurance. And there are a whole host of brands out there. We have Trupanion now, because I lecture a lot about having pet insurance, and I never did, but I do now. And so, it needs to be what works for you. I would say there are so many good companies out there that, there's Nationwide, there's a laundry list of them. Consumer Reports did a great write-up on, what to look for in a pet insurance company and those sorts of things. But knowing, again, the environments, the conditions, the training, just so much of what we put our dogs through, having that backup plan so that you don't have to make a financial decision along with a medical decision is just going to ease the minds of all parties involved. So certainly looking into that is another important thing to take away from tonight's lecture. So lastly, I'm going to, just kind of talk about I mentioned those environmental conditions that we put our dogs through, right? So especially this time of year, and then as we move into early season hunting, knowing the signs of heat exhaustion and what happens as they transition into heat stroke. So heat exhaustion, they're going to have excessive panting. So our dogs don't sweat. They do a little bit through the pads on their paws, but most of the way that they offload heat is through panting. So I like to use their tongue as kind of the gauge for how hot they are. This was actually a January day in Western Kansas where we were out pheasant hunting. It's a little small to see here, but Finn's tongue there is certainly longer than it should be. It is also starting to just curl a little bit. And so this is a sign to me that, all right, this was towards the end of the day for us anyway, and we were going back to the truck. But making sure we get him to a cooler environment, get him some water and cool down. Because if that continues to, again, climb, we're going to have risks of heat stroke. So if we're looking at excessive panting, which also then is that increased respiratory rate. But if you also look, if they're starting to kind of hang back and try to be in your shadow, or they're going to find shade, that's another sign that their internal body temperature is climbing. If they are not responding to you like they normally do, and they're not listening to your commands, or they're looking at you like suddenly you are speaking, German and you've always spoken English to them, these are all signs that, again, their body temperatures are going up too high and too fast, and we need to find a place to cool them down.
All right, so I have a question that came in and I've been holding, and Scott asked, I'm in the South and an athletic trainer. Please cover what is the best protocol for effective cooling for sporting dogs. He says retrievers. I know the canine cool different canines cool different than humans. So what are the best practices in an emergency to get their body temperature down?
Yeah, yeah. Great questions and perfect timing, right? So, what I like to, what I will sometimes have in there that wasn't necessarily listed in those first set of medications is rubbing alcohol. So I know it's on the slides at the end here, but rubbing alcohol and even those pre-moistened, like now, you get them when you get on the airplane and things like that, but those pre-moistened alcohol swabs and putting them on their pads and then also in their armpits and their groins, that alcohol evaporates and takes the heat with them, but and that's when you start to kind of get in that critical time period where you're moving from heat exhaustion and you're thinking more like, oh my goodness, we might be starting to deal with some heat collapse, some heat stroke. That's when oftentimes I'll really start to pour on that alcohol. We definitely don't want to take them from hot to freezing cold. So, if you're getting them back to the truck and you notice, okay, they are looking, I mean, they're panting like crazy. The other thing, if you have breeds that are lighter colored, if when their ears are starting to turn really red and their eyes look bloodshot, that's another sign that their body temperature, their core body temperature is climbing too high. Getting them in some cooler water. So taking some, if you've got, a lot of times we'll have an ice chest or something with us, soaking some towels in that cooler water and then putting that in their armpits and their groins. That's going to be, again, where their main blood vessels are circulating. And so getting that coolness on those key blood vessels is going to help to bring their body temperature back down. If you can get them, get them into the truck with the AC. If you're too far from that, getting them, into a lake or a pond and getting them cooled off. And certainly getting them in the shade and out of that sun is going to be another key way to get their body temperature down. But we don't want to take them from like the hot and putting them in, the ice water in your cooler or dumping that ice water on them. That can oftentimes make their body temperature swing too far in the other direction and can put them actually into shock. So you want to cool them down slowly by taking like those cool towels and putting them there. If you can get them under a fan, so there's that air circulating over them, that again will help to cool them down in a more controlled fashion.
So you went to LSU,
I
and
did.
now I live in the South as well. A good friend of mine, uh, Lester Langley from Louisiana, tells me how September 1st, the opening day of dove season, more dogs overheat and die from heat exhaustion on that day than any other day. So it's just one
Yeah.
of those things to be incredible. You're so excited. You haven't hunted all year. And September 1st in the South is hot.
Yep.
So
It's still hot. Oh yeah.
they need to be really, really careful.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, I mean, and that's the other thing too. Like if you're traveling to go hunt, right, and you're up in the north and dove season opens and you're going to go meet some buddies down, in South Texas and do some dove hunting, like your dog may not be conditioned to that heat, that humidity, and that in itself is going to have them their internal body temperatures rise much more quickly than if they are living there in that environment. But it's still, even if they are conditioned, it's still something that you have to keep such a close eye on in that early season. I mean, certainly any time of the year, but it's an easy one where, like you said, we just get so jazzed about like, oh, fall is 100% my most favorite time of year between the hunting and the college football and the great weather and all of that. But that September 1st, we haven't quite reached those cool temps yet. So keeping a really close eye on your dog's body language is so very important. And then the flip side of that, right, is that hypothermia. There are plenty of times where you're out there in those freezing conditions and really understanding again that our dogs can get affected. Yes, they have that good coat. Maybe they are conditioned to the cooler temperatures, Or maybe it's the opposite of the scenario that we just talked about, where, hey, you're living in, Louisiana, and you go up to Minnesota to go pheasant hunting or grouse, or, the grouse woods in Wisconsin or something like that. Like, and your dog is not conditioned to that cold temperature. Really understanding what hypothermia looks like, which is similar to what hyperthermia or that heat stroke looks like, where they do get that kind of that disorientation. They get the reluctance to follow those commands, that excessive shivering that burns up energy super, super fast. So it's really important, again, to look for those signs. And certainly if they are wet, if the sun is not out, if the wind is blowing, all of those can just increase that risk of hypothermia in those conditions. So it's important to take into consideration not just the actual temperature of the air, but then also those environmental conditions that are happening around you as well, because those will play a huge role in how your dog maintains their body temperature. And certainly, I'd add to that, hydration is so very important, especially for our sporting dogs, because when they're in good hydration, they're much better at being able to keep warm when it's cold out and keep cool when the temperatures outside are warm. So having that balance, again, and keeping their hydration at a tip-top level is going to set everybody up for success. And so this is the age-old question I get: what do you have in your vest versus what do you have in your truck? And I will give you the layman's version of what I have in my vest and my truck, because certainly as a licensed veterinarian, I'm able to have more drugs and things like that in my possession than the average citizen is. But this is this is my list. It is not the end-all be-all list. Certainly out there, you can Google first aid kits, and you will come up with 100 different variations of things that are there. I did get asked this at one presentation as a joke. That is not an actual picture of my first aid kit. That was just a mock-up of kind of the bag, right? Of just something that is small and also durable that I can throw in the back of my hunting vest to take with me, and has a little list of the things that I keep in there that's gonna help in case of an on-site emergency, so I can get back to my truck and have more tools to be able to take care of whatever wound that's there. And then back at the truck, certainly it's going to be a longer list. There's going to be backup of things like rubbing alcohol and hydrogen peroxide and another bottle of saline and wound flush and things like that. That's there. I will say one of the things that if you click on this next slide that I did add in there after listening to a variety of podcasts, I think it'll build.
I may have screwed that up. I may not have that next slide because
Okay.
it looked like a duplicate when I was building it. Tell me
Okay,
this.
I see. The one that's not on there, and again, depending on where you hunt and things like that, is an e-collar, a cone collar. I say
Oh,
e-collar all the time, but I know in this audience, and even in my own audience, e-collar has two meanings. But having a cone collar, it's one. It can lay flat, right? So if it's not in the cone shape to go around your dog's head, you can slide it right in, the back of your truck somewhere, easily stay flat. But what that can help with is, if we think about some of the slides early in the presentation with those open sores on their paws or things like that, to just prevent them from chewing off the bandage overnight, or looking at the wound that's there, or if they have something going on with their eye, to not continue to rub at their eye and make matters much worse than until you can get to true veterinary care. That's going to be super, super helpful. So I would add to the list that's here is one of the cone collars. And again, you can get them off of Amazon, or your veterinarian, or your local pet supplies store oftentimes will carry those cone collars for your dog. And then with that, I would say thank y'all. This was this slide. If anybody on the line knows knows Keith's shop. This was from a hunt that we had with him at his property up in North Dakota. We had 9 dogs, and his wife Kathy managed to get all of them to look at the camera at the same time, which I think is a minor miracle. But yeah, we had a blast up there, rustling up some pheasants and having some good times. Unfortunately, about 6 of those, I think, yeah, 6 of the dogs have now moved, or 5 of the dogs have now moved on across the Rainbow Bridge. But we were fortunate to have one, the picture taken, and two, some really great days of having some fun with some sporting dogs. Man, that was a great time.
Well, that was awesome. That was awesome. Thank you so much. I do have a couple questions I want to throw at you, and to wrap us up. And so, Robin's got a few. I've got a few on screen. A couple questions talk about snake bites.
Okay.
So, and one, let me see what I've got here. Now, okay, so let me just, there's 2 of them actually.
It's the same one.
Huh?
It's the same.
Okay. Well, you know what? I tell you, we had a veterinarian come to do a clinic at our retriever club, and he said the best thing to keep in your tool in your first aid kit for snake bites is your car keys. Now,
Get to
I
the
don't know
hospital
what.
as soon as possible. Yeah.
So, I mean, because people were asking what to do, like this question here, gentleman says, what is the milliliters to pound ratio should be given for a snake bite? Should it be given intramuscular or sub-Q? And I'm thinking like, well, wait a minute. This is probably not, I don't know. You tell me. This is a veterinarian's decision, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, like, for snake bites would, the other veterinarian I would concur with. You want to get them to the emergency room as quick as possible. I will say, if you have that Benadryl on hand, I am a big fan of giving that. And again, it's a milligram per pound. So for like Finn, who's 75 pounds, he's getting 75 milligrams of Benadryl. Um, and that really mostly is to keep them calm while they're on the ride there, and help a little bit, with potentially with that reaction to the snake bite itself. Only about, the stats are different depending on what source you look at, but they say anywhere between about 30 to 50% of the time the venom actually gets into the dog. So it's not a guarantee that just because they got bit, they're going to have the venom in them. But it is, again, super critical that you know where that emergency room is and that emergency clinic is, so that you can get there as quickly as possible to be able to assess, what is his blood pressure doing? What is his respiratory rate doing? What's his heart rate? All of that, to really better decide, did he get the venom? Does he need the antivenom? All that kind of stuff, and develop a better plan by those critical care doctors.
So somebody asks, what kind of eye ointment should I keep in my kit? Should it be non-steroidal?
I would put one that is a triple antibiotic of some sort, or just a straight antibiotic eye lube, that's there, not one with a steroid. So sometimes they will come with their eye drops that have hydrocortisone in it, or dexamethasone. Because the eye doesn't have blood supply, if there is a scratch and it's not just an irritation, and we put a steroid in that eye, it can actually slow the healing and make matters much worse. So I would just have a straight up antibiotic eye ointment or eye drops. They come in a variety of forms. And again, having that good conversation with your veterinarian. Oftentimes they will they will sell you that to have. So because they know just how critical eye injuries can be. And on
Okay.
that note, we do, when I hunt with Finn, he wears the Rec Specs. I don't get any kickbacks. I'm not endorsed by Rec Specs, but we do wear the goggles, because I have seen, and he's experienced it himself, an eye injuries. And that ended our hunt for the weekend because he got a little grass on that was then stuck to his eyeball. And by the time I could get it off, it had already taken a piece of his cornea with it. And so he was done hunting. So we do, and again, we didn't get him till he was 2.5. We didn't start hunting with him till he was 4.5. And he wears the rec specs. He does not like them, but he wears them, and he's so more focused on finding birds for us that he doesn't care that he has the goggles on his face. So it is something that you can train them into if you have the fortunate opportunity to have your dog as a puppy. Certainly training them with them as puppies is probably an easier route to go than what we did with Finn.
So one of the things you talked about and you had in the medicines was Flora Florida
Yep.
for diarrhea.
Yep.
Somebody asked, would you recommend keeping metronidazole or Flagyl in your kit as well?
That's a slippery slope. But it is certainly something I would say commonly veterinarians prescribe it anytime there's kind of this nondescript diarrhea that happens. Knowing where our hunting dogs like to drink from, and whether they're out there doing hunt tests or field trials, there's usually water somewhere around. A lot of times it's stagnant, and there may be giardia that's in there. I really try to avoid. We know more and more and more about what chronic use of antibiotics does for our dog's GI tract. And so if we can use that metronidazole very judiciously, meaning we know that they have giardia and that's why we're prescribing it, that's a better long-term solution. So I really try hard. Finn stays on Fortiflora for us during the hunting season. He starts it in the preseason and then just stays on it because it's just easier. Again, that ounce of prevention for us. It's certainly not wrong to just use that intermittently as diarrhea occurs. So I would say I would have it potentially as like emergency backup, where if Fortiflora is not working, we're on a multi-day hunt, and I know that he's been drinking stagnant water, that can oftentimes stop it and help him to absorb his nutrients, so we can still keep hunting for the next couple of days. But I wouldn't go right to metronidazole when they break with diarrhea.
Robin, this question you gave me, best procedures for rehydrating?
No, what products?
Okay, yeah, because people are using, other than just water, is there anything you recommend for rehydrating a dog?
Yeah, there are some out there, some osmolyte solutions. Purina actually has one. It's more marketed towards cats, but it can be used for dogs as well, called Hydrocare. That uses, a lot. It's got whey and some osmolytes, so not electrolytes, which are kind of like what we use with that Gatorade or whatever brand of sport drink you want to use. We will, you can certainly use that, and there are a number of products that are out there on the market that will help with hydration. There's the Canine Athlete has one as well that they do pretty good quality control. I would throw this out just in general for supplements, whether it's a hydration supplement or any other joint supplement that you're using for your dogs, making sure that manufacturer has some sort of third-party testing for quality and safety and accuracy of their label is going to be huge, because the supplement industry is a little bit of the wild, wild west, and doesn't have a whole lot of regulation to it. So it's really important, mostly because you want to make sure that there are no contaminants that are in there, like heavy metals. And, if you're using a CBD supplement or something like that, that there's not THC or other things that might be harmful for your dog that's in there, and that you're making sure you're spending your money on a good product and not pixie dust.
So one other question about, we talked about hypothermia, about cold tail. Is there anything other than just time to manage that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly time. I'll do a little plug for, I'm also certified in acupuncture, veterinary acupuncture as well. So and I'm a strong believer. I think that's one of the reasons that Finn has stayed as active as he has. He's almost 10, and he, this weekend he ran 15 miles with me. And, but he gets regular body work that's done. He's lucky enough to live with me. But having, doing some due diligence and looking for, somebody who either does acupuncture or rehab and that conditioning is really going to be helpful for our sporting dogs. And so in the case of, whether it's swimmer's tail, cold tail, whatever whatever name you like to call it, that oftentimes can help to kind of get that back up and going again, using acupuncture or other kind of chiropractic work can sometimes help as well.
So somebody asked about brands of dextrose. Now I'm not quite sure.
It's a supplement.
Okay. So is there anything, and do you have any comments on that at all?
I usually, so a couple of things, whether you can use, I run a lot of marathons, we do endurance sports here. So we'll have like the goo packets or the energy gel packets. Those you can use on your dog as well. They don't need the electrolytes as much as, a lot of times they're made with various forms of simple sugars. You just want to make sure that you're not using the ones that have caffeine in them, because not that that's super terrible for our dogs, but again, probably not necessary for them, and we don't want to stress their kidneys with that caffeine. So that's one option. The other options that are out there that are great are the honey sticks. A lot of times those are kind of the new, or not new, but they're a pretty commonplace to get, and they're easy to administer because they are in that little stick form. So those are good ones to be able to carry. I also, again, being a veterinarian, have access to straight up, those dextrose supplies from the clinic. So that's what I have. But those other options, whether that's straight Caro syrup, some of the power gels without caffeine, or the honey sticks, are great to use in case of emergency of low blood sugar.
And you were worried we weren't going to have enough questions. And I was going to try to keep it an hour, but holy smokes, you just killed it. And I want to thank you so much for being here tonight and taking the time to be so generous about, sharing that information. I know it's been valuable. And I've been doing this a long time, and there's a lot of great stuff I learned as well. I guess that's it for tonight, everybody. Awesome. RuthAnn, thank you so much. Well, bye, everybody. We'll see you soon.